here's Stephen A. Smith.
Welcome to hour number 2 of the Stephen A. Smith Show, here with you over the airways of ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 250 plus markets across the United States of America, plus ESPN Radio on Sirius XM, Channel 80, plus ESPN Radio simulcast over the live national television airways of ESPN News. Number to call up as always is 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. The Stephen A. Smith Show is being brought to you by Indeed, used by over 3 million businesses for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness, search Indeed. Plus, need seats to a game? Download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat, get a Vivid seat. On the line with us right now, as promised, is Jumpstart hour number 2. Is one of the foremost authorities on the sport of boxing, does an absolutely outstanding job for the ESPN family, covering boxing for us in the digital world, the print world, and of course on television sometimes as well. I'm talking about the great one himself, the one and only Dan Rayfield is on the line with yours truly. What's going on, Dan? How are you, buddy? How's everything going?
Everything's great, Stephen. Thank you for that very fine introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, it's well-deserved, no question about it. We know what's going on. We know what's at stake. This Saturday night at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, Daniel Jacobs, the International Boxing Federation IBF World Middleweight title will be on the line. The WBA Super World Middleweight title is on the line. The WBC title is on the line as well. He's fighting for it against Canelo Alvarez. Talk to me coming into this fight. Who do you believe should be the favorite and why?
Oh, I think without question that Canelo Alvarez should be the favorite. He is the favorite. He has a long track record of big wins against a lot of quality opponents. He's faced many, many top fighters. His only loss of his entire career, when he was 23 years old, got outboxed by Floyd Mayweather Jr. No shame if you lose to a fighter like Floyd Mayweather at a time when he was still, somewhat inexperienced at the top level. And Daniel Jacobs has been a good fighter, a top fighter for a long time. Just does not have the caliber of victories or track record that Canelo Alvarez has. A lot of people look to the fact that Canelo has 2 big fights against Golovkin, a draw that most people thought he lost, but still got the draw, the win that was last September, whereas Danny Jacobs in 2017 suffered a decision loss to Golovkin. Close fight, really good fight, but a loss. So people know Canelo better. He's got the better track record. He's got higher accomplishment, and deservedly he is the favorite. But by no means, at least to my mind and to people that you talk to who covered this for a living, do they think this is any kind of blowout fight whatsoever. This is a highly competitive, at least on paper, fight that shapes up like a very entertaining fight, and a fight that is, even if you think Canelo is going to win the fight, it's going to be probably a little bit tough getting there.
What makes it competitive when you look at Daniel Jacobs? What is it about Daniel Jacobs other than a decision loss to Triple G that makes us, or should make us, believe that this is going to be a competitive fight?
Well, Daniel Jacobs has been a top fighter for a number of years. I mean, this is a guy that's got other wins on his record. When he won his vacant title this past October, he did so against an undefeated fighter named Sergey Devenchenko, who did not have a lot of professional experience. He was only like 13 or 14-0, but had a monstrous, massive amateur career, akin to, but not as good as, of Vasily Lomachenko type thing, 300-plus amateur wins at the top level, fighting all the top fighters out of the former Soviet Union countries. I mean, a real stud in the amateur ranks, and has proven himself to be a quality guy in the pro ranks. And Danny Jacobs defeated him in a good, close fight in October to get that title. He has other wins of consequence. He did have a fight with Golovkin where a lot of people left the arena that night thinking that Danny Jacobs should have had his hand raised. That would obviously change the perception by a lot of people had he actually gotten the victory that a lot of people thought that he deserved. I mean, you just spend 5 minutes watching Danny Jacobs fight, and the style he fights in, the attributes that he brings. He's physically larger than Canelo Alvarez. He can fight going backwards, which is not something a lot of guys, especially that big, can do. He has excellent punching power. He was also a top amateur, coming up through the USA ranks. He was not an Olympian, but he was at the top level. Multiple New York Golden Gloves championships, which is one of the toughest amateur routes to go if you're in the amateur ranks. And he's just a really good fighter.
Dan Rayfield right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. I looked at Canelo Alvarez, and I was of the mindset before the Triple G encounters that this was the smaller fighter. He's moving up in weight. He's not truly a middleweight. I don't know how wise it is for him to find himself in that particular situation. I know he's a counterpuncher. I know he can box. He's certainly proven to me that he can take a punch. But that second fight, watching his body and look at him throw those body shots to Canelo Alvarez, to Triple G. I don't know many boxers that could take the body shots that Triple G took in that second encounter. Does that have you looking at Canelo Alvarez in a different light than you looked at him when he was a junior middleweight or even a welterweight?
Well, number one, he's always been a tremendous body puncher. I mean, traditionally Mexican fighters, that's one of the things they're taught from the crib is how to throw the left hook to the body. And Canelo Alvarez does it, as well as just about anybody shy of, the great Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. So, throwing body punches it was not a surprise to anybody that watches the fight. Canelo has, for a while before he fought Golovkin the first time, there was a lot of discussion from his team about, why they were maybe, at least the perception of some people was that they were delaying that fight with the talking point, he's growing into become a middleweight. Well, he was growing into becoming a middleweight, a full-fledged, legit adult middleweight. He's now that. He is a bona fide middleweight. His last fight, matter of fact, in December, when he fought above the weight, he fought in the super middleweight division. But now he's back in the division where he is most comfortable, where he belongs. He is a bona fide, strong, powerful, in his prime, middleweight champion of the world. Canelo Alvarez also, at least to my eyes, and I've covered him ever since he came to this country many years ago, he is one of the few fighters who I watch, even in his prime, seems to get better and better and better as the fights go on. He always adds something to his game, even if it's a little wrinkle, whether it's, using his other hand better, whether it's, placing body shots in different parts of the body, his ability to counter, to stand in the pocket and actually use defense. One of the reasons why, people just think, oh, he's just this prototypical Mexican brawler. That's absolutely not correct. You mentioned good counterpuncher, but also, very defensively responsible. He gets hit with punches, but he has an ability to roll with some of those shots, to take the sting out of them, not take the full force of those punches. And that's why he's still going strong without having lost a step whatsoever after, more than 50 professional fights.
Real quickly on this particular answer, why did he move up to super middleweight to fight Rocky Fielding? Was that just to acquire or capture another title at a different weight class? What was the reason? I mean, Rocky Fielding, you looked at him, he was tall, he was skinny, he looked tailor-made for Canelo, and obviously Canelo made quick work of him. Why even take that fight?
Well, he wanted to get a second fight in last year. Remember, he was suspended because of a positive drug test, and so the first fight, or the rematch with Golovkin, was postponed from May to September. Still wanted to get a second fight in. So they were coming back on very short notice from September to December, so they weren't going to go in with a big mega fight. He was changing broadcasters because HBO was getting out of the boxing business. The Zone was coming in, and he did that deal with them. He made like $15 million, so that's a nice, easy payday to fight Rocky Fielding. But more to the point, I think besides all those particular things we just mentioned, he felt like this was an opportunity to do two things. One, have his first ever fight in New York City, where he's wanted to fight in Madison Square Garden, and they were able to do that and make the schedule work. And also because Rocky Fielding was available, and Canelo felt, even though Fielding had a second-tier title in the super middleweight division, for him he felt like there was a feather in his cap to be able to go up a few pounds against the perfect kind of opponent for him and grab another belt. To put on that resume checklist, on the to-do list, so to speak, but knowing that his really big fights and the bigger money and the more fan-friendly fights and the things that people wanted to see were still in the middleweight division where he could make that weight with no problem. So they just took that as a one-step, one-shot deal. I liken it to, if you go back in the day, there was a time when Pernell Whitaker, a welterweight champion, dominating fighter, took a one fight move up to capture a world title as a junior middleweight, and then immediately came back down to weight. Same kind of situation with Canelo. Saw the opportunity, took it, and now he's back where he belongs. Dan
Rayfield, boxing writer extraordinaire for ESPN, right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Those two wars that Canelo went against Triple G with, When we talk about boxing, and obviously you're one of the people that I listen to, very, very much so when it comes to the sport of boxing, when you consider the wars that he had been in, usually in some instances we see wars having taken away from somebody, whether it's Riddick Bowe and Evander Holyfield or something along those lines, dating back to Ali, Frazier, and the trilogy that they had against one another, et cetera, et cetera. When you see this, I don't see any signs that anything was taken away from Canelo Alvarez after the 2 fights against Triple G. What about you?
I agree with that, but remember, the only thing we've been able to see since that fight, the second fight anyway, is the fight against Rocky Fielding, which was, a fight even a diminished Canelo Alvarez probably would have been able to handle with relative ease. The first real test, frankly, is going to be what we see on Saturday against Danny Jacobs. But my perception is, in seeing him and talking to him and watching those fights back, he didn't take huge punishment in those fights, in my opinion, and he sounds good and he looks good and he feels, you can just sort of feel that he is in a good spot. He seems very strong. I detect absolutely zero difference in his demeanor, in the way he carries himself, and the people around him whatsoever from what happened the first couple of Triple G fights to where you are now.
But listen to that, Dan. If you've seen nothing that was taken away from him in the 2 fights against Triple G, why should we want to see a third? Because clearly Triple G has signed with the Zone as well, and he definitely wants to fight Canelo Alvarez again without question because of the money just as much as anything else. But I don't know what else is there to take from Canelo Alvarez going up against Triple G, with the exception of this fight against Daniel Jacobs. What else is there for him, Canelo, in the middleweight division? If Daniel Jacobs works out with relative ease and Triple G is not something that we should be clamoring to see, but so much, what else is there for Canelo Alvarez to do?
Well, first off, if they don't fight a third time, I can live with that. I think a lot of people do want to see it, though, frankly, because they were so close. A lot of people think that Golovkin should have walked away with his hand raised 2 times and not instead of being 0-1 in a draw. So that's one factor. But as far as Canelo's perspective, he's been asked about a third Triple G fight, since the moment that the fight with Danny Jacobs was signed. And what he has said consistently is, he's open to it. If the fans want it, I'll do it. But he's been making a little bit more of a caveat the last several weeks, month or so, saying, I'll fight Triple G if he has a title, because this is the year I want to sweep the middleweight division, win all the titles. Now, he knows that when it comes time to fight the second time this year in September, when Canelo has his next date, everything goes okay on Saturday, that Golovkin is not going to have another title belt because his next fight is on June 8th. He's fighting slightly above the 160-pound weight limit against a tune-up type opponent in Steve Rolls at Madison Square Garden, and that's not a world title fight. So if he's serious about wanting to be the guy that has the undisputed title in middleweight and he beats Danny Jacobs, he'll have 3 of the major belts. The 4th belt is owned by the Providence, Rhode Island undefeated Olympian, 2-time world champion Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, who was going to be here ringside on Saturday, wanting to line up the winner of that fight. Now, he's good buddies with Danny Jacobs, but he would fight him because there's money and glory there. But he really wants to fight with Canelo Alvarez. And Alvarez, if he really is truly serious about wanting the 4th title to become undisputed, there's never been a Mexican undisputed champion of the 4-belt era. That would be a huge feather in his cap, sort of the way he went up to try to grab that super middleweight belt. Demetrius Andrade, and I wrote this yesterday, is going to fight June 29th at home in Providence for the first time in his career against a quality contender named Zaleski from Poland, whose only loss was a very close decision against Danny Jacobs a couple years ago. And so there's a possibility that Canelo, because he has no love for Triple G, they have a bad blood these days after all the stuff that went down with the bad drug test, he may, give Triple G the finger, so to speak, and maybe go fight Demetrius Andrade for the opportunity to be the undisputed champion. So I think that is a possibility.
Where would that leave Triple G if Canelo doesn't want to fight him?
That will leave Triple G, looking for the next best available guy. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Again, if Triple G and Canelo don't fight the 3rd time, but Danny Jacobs and him have a good fight on Saturday and it's a close competitive fight, I don't know if there's a reason why we wouldn't necessarily see a rematch between Golovkin and Jacobs. They put on a great fight in 2017. It wouldn't be necessarily for the stakes that there were the first time around, with world titles at stake, et cetera, but it's still a very attractive matchup. It's going to come down to, obviously, the folks at the Zone who have signed all these guys, because Demetrius Andrade is with them also. They're going to have some input in what fights get made, and, the promoters are going to sit down and talk about it. But, Triple G, on his own as a star in this sport, is going to have the ability to lure other guys into the ring, because only one guy can fight Canelo at a time, and the guy that doesn't get the Canelo lottery ticket can maybe get the consolation prize and fight Golovkin.
Dan Rayfield right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's get into a broader discussion about boxing before I let you get on out of here, Dan, because nobody's more, more qualified to discuss the subject than you. I'd like to know, with HBO stepping out of the boxing business, with Bob Arum for Top Rank calling out Al Heyman after Terrence Crawford, won his fight against Amir Khan, etc., when Amir Khan quit as far as I'm concerned, I would ask you this question. How are you feeling about the state of boxing now compared to how you felt about it 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
I think it's in a better spot now because there's more attention on it. There's more platforms that are investing large amounts of money in it, whether it's the amount of money that ESPN is paying in rights fees, Top Rank, over the course of what was originally like a 4-year deal that was torn up after 1 year and turned into like a 7 or 8 year deal, plus all the massive investment they've made to bring events for boxing, both Top Rank fights as well as overseas fights that Top Rank, buys rights to put on ESPN Plus. So that's huge for the sport. You have the investment from Fox in the PBC platform. They're showing fights on free national television, Saturday nights at 8 o'clock, roughly once a month, not to mention their cable fights that are of a high quality. So they're investing a tremendous amount of money. Showtime is still in the game, investing their money, doing significant fights with big names. So to me, it's that aspect of it is good. There's money flowing. It's in front of a lot of people. It's on free national television. It's on basic cable. It's on streaming services. I mean, you can find it pretty much wherever you want. It's obviously good for the fighters because there's more money flowing than there's been in a long, long time, maybe ever in the history of the sport. The only downside, negatively, is that you're basically operating a business that's within, I call it like the three universes. You have the ESPN Top Rank universe, which they do their fights and do a hell of a job doing them. You have the Showtime, Fox, PBC fights. They put on a lot of good fights, but they're not fighting with the other companies' guys. And then you take the DAZN side of the street, which is involved. It's DAZN, it's Golden Boy fighters like Canelo and some of their other fighters, as well as Eddie Hearn's fighters from Matchroom Boxing, including Danny Jacobs and a number of other quality guys that they have under their contract. Anthony Joshua, for example, one of the heavyweight champions. So they do fights in there, and there's not that much overlap. Occasionally there'll be a fight that gets made between the two for different reasons. Maybe it's a mandatory. But what could really make boxing bloom and blossom even greater than it is if they could figure out a way to come together and to allow those fighters in each of those silos to fight each other in the biggest fights the fans want. Dan
Rayfield right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. One of the other things I'm interested in asking you about, and I get this from my man Michael Thompson. If you notice, he works for ESPN LA, the father of Clay Thompson, 3-time champion with the Golden State Warriors. Michael Thompson does work for us right here on ESPN LA, and he had been asking me to ask you this question for weeks now, and he just reminded me a few minutes ago. Remember how Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns both moved up from welterweight to the middleweight division to ultimately fight Marvin Hagler? If Bob Arum is right and Al Heyman is in the way, you can answer that question whether or not Al Heyman is in the way as well of an Errol Spence Jr. Terrence Crawford fight, because I think that's the number one fight everybody in boxing wants to see. Maybe Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua as well. But I would ask you this, Dan Rayfield. What about the possibility of Errol Spence Jr. moving up to fight Canelo? What's the possibility of that?
Well, listen, I have said for a long time, as a matter of fact, that in my mind, the biggest fight in boxing a few years from now would be Canelo Alvarez against Errol Spence Jr. And I have visions of that. Obviously they can bring a fight like that to the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas and, generate huge amounts of money. And,
why would that be the biggest fight for you, Dan? Why would that be the biggest fight for you?
But hold on. You take that fight and you put it in AT&T Stadium in outside of Dallas, where Canelo has fought and drawn 50,000 plus people, and where Errol Spence just fought a month and a half ago against Mikey Garcia and drew over 40,000 people. And you bring in the Dallas folks, who would be there because Errol's a hometown guy, and Canelo Alvarez is a bona fide draw and a huge star within the Hispanic community, which is obviously very large in Texas. You make a massive fight. I think it's absolutely conceivable that down the road that Errol Spence will ultimately become a middleweight or take a chance to fight as a middleweight for that kind of a fight, and Canelo Alvarez is still going to be around. That is a gargantuan, massive fight that, again, a lot of things have to happen. A lot of things got to fall into place. But that could be a spectacle beyond spectacles. I agree with Thompson. Huge, huge mega fight. I hope that fight happens. in my long view of the sport, we want to see guys like Spence and Crawford now, or Joshua and Wilder now. But I'm thinking like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, Canelo Spence, gargantuan mega fight.
Well, let me ask you this. If Spence was to fight Crawford right now, who would you favor?
Well, at welterweight, that's a hard fight to pick. They're both super talented guys. I mean, I have Errol Spence rated number 1 in the welterweight division, but that's based largely on the fact that he's been fighting in that weight class longer, has maybe a little bit more accomplishment in the weight division. But Terrence Crawford has got the same kind of talent, both super fast, both good counter punchers, both good punchers, period, defensive, responsible defensively, but good amateur career. Spence was an Olympian, but Crawford was, just a hair away from being at that level. I mean, that's a coin flip. I got to be, that's the kind of fight where you don't really make a pick till like sort of the end, where you sort of maybe want to look and see how the guy looks,
okay,
how you hear him talk, and how he maybe, his body language. It's a hard 50-50 fight right there.
I'm interjecting and cutting you short because I got a couple more questions I want to ask. Why I got to get you on out of here right now.
But
when
Clay
you look
Thompson,
at
that guy's a genius to think about that fight.
Yes, that's Michael Thompson's daddy, no question about it. I'm sorry, that's Clay Thompson's daddy, Michael Thompson. But here's the deal. Is there anybody else in the welterweight division that you think could beat Errol Spence Jr. outside of Terrence Crawford?
At the moment, I mean, look, anybody can lose on a given night, but obviously that's the fight where you look at the weight class and you think, okay, who can beat the other guy? And the only one I can think of that's the most competitive, most hard fight to pick is that fight. It's sort of like I think about with the lightweight division. I don't think there's a lightweight or below in the world that can hang with Vasily Lomachenko except for Mikey Garcia. And likewise, I don't think there's a single lightweight or below that can hang with Mikey Garcia except for Lomachenko. They're not fighting, but that's the fight you want to see. It's a 50-50 kind of fight. Same kind of deal with Crawford and Spence, and same kind of deal in the heavyweight division with Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder.
How did you feel about Mikey Garcia stepping up 2 weight classes to challenge Errol Spence Jr. as opposed to demanding that Lomachenko fight him at the lightweight division?
Listen, Stephen A., I live in the real world, and I understand the business issues and the politics issues and the nature of the platforms that they fight on. And I have a lot of respect for Mikey daring to be great. That's what I call it. He wanted to go up. He wanted to make history by trying to win a world title in a 5th weight division. Errol Spence was available to him. Errol Spence is a guy that he's been calling out since even before he fought Robert Easter last summer to unify the lightweight titles. He obviously made, north of $8 or $9 million for that fight, so it was by far and away the biggest payday he's ever had. So I don't have any quarrel with him trying to make that match and try to achieve the greatness that would have come if he had been able to win the fight. Okay, he lost the fight. That doesn't mean we still can't try to see the Lomachenko fight. It's a hard, difficult fight to make for 1,000 reasons, but I'm hopeful that maybe someday it will happen.
Dan Rayford right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Before I let you get on out of here, your prediction for this fight, Jacobs, Canelo Alvarez, Saturday night.
Close fight, tough fight, good fight, but I think in the end, Canelo Alvarez a little bit more well-rounded, do a little bit more, a little bit better of a puncher, a little bit better of a boxer, and the judges love him, and it's shown, and I think he gets a decision.
You don't think it ends in a knockout?
No, I mean, anything is possible, but I don't see any reason why I would think that. Canelo has shown himself to have a great chin over the course of his career. Danny Jacobs is, in his first loss many years ago, which I was here in Las Vegas for, he did get knocked out by a fighter named Dimitri Pirog, who was a very talented middleweight whose career was cut short by a back injury. They fought for a vacant title. He got stopped in that fight. The referee basically jumped on him and wouldn't let him try to get up. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and I'm not big on excuses, but I'm going to give Danny Jacobs a pass in that fight because everybody who followed him at that time knows he should never have gotten in the ring that night. Number one, it was a bad match because they pushed him into that fight too quickly, in my opinion. Pirog was a much more talented guy and more experienced and seasoned at that moment. But more importantly, Danny Jacobs' grandmother, the woman who raised him, who was like his mother to him, died like 4 days or 5 days before that fight. And he should never have gotten in the ring that night. He was extremely distraught about that whole situation, understandably. Had no business in being in the boxing ring. His mind was on everything other than the boxing match that night, and he paid the price for it. So I give him a pass on that loss. Other than that knockdown and knockout in that fight where he was getting up to his feet, I think he's only been down one other time. It was a flash knockdown against Sergio Mora in a fight that he came back and won by knockout.
And he went down to Triple G. He went down against Triple G as well.
Oh, yeah, and exactly, in the Triple G fight. So those two, again, but Triple G is like one of the best punchers maybe in boxing history, to be honest with you, in the middleweight division anyway. And so, again, he's shown a good chin over the course of his career. I mean, I saw Canelo Alvarez in one of his first fights that were, significant fights in the United States, fought on a big undercard and almost got knocked out in the first round by Miguel Cotto's older brother. And everybody thought, oh, my goodness, this guy is all hype. He's never going to be able to hang. He's got no chin, blah, blah, blah. He's gone on since then. You don't ever see him get rocked or wobbled or down or anything like that. And he's become one of the best fighters, in the world. Right. And, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. So these guys, the reason I don't think a knockout is because both guys have shown themselves to have good chins. Now, if Canelo can get that body shot in against that tall, rangy Danny Jacobs, you never know.
I got one last question for you. Spence, we know he has an opportunity to make over at least over $20 million if he fights Terrence Crawford. One would ask, why is he allowing Al Haymon to stop that from happening? What's the educated response to that, Dan Rayfield? You would know.
Errol Spence is an adult. He's a grown man. He has will of his own. If he wants to make the fight with Terrence Crawford, he needs to go and speak with Al Haymon and his people and say, Al, go call Bob, or let's figure out a way to get the fight done. It's just not that easy. If you're Al Haymon and Bob Arum goes down to the press row after the Crawford-Khan fight and talks about how I want to make this fight, he's been saying it all along, and I'll take Bob at his word. I think he does want to make the fight because he doesn't really have a lot of other options for a big fight for Crawford. The problem is, even if that's the case, you can't then spend the next 15 minutes calling Al Haymon terrible names and saying things making into like some kind of racial issue, et cetera, and not expect him to have some pushback and, take your call on Monday morning. So, everybody's kind of got to take a deep breath and, you don't have to be best friends with people you make boxing deals with or any business deal for that matter. You got to try to get in a room and do it and see what's best, not only for your fighter, for your company, for your broadcast partner, and try to get a deal done. But there's been it takes two to tango. So Bob can say, I want to make a fight. He can be truthful and well-meaning and want to do that. Maybe just got caught up in the emotion by saying the things he said about Al. But, the Haymon side hasn't really shown any desire to make the fight whatsoever. They won't even bring it up. They did a graphic on one of the Haymon shows that PBC operates where they put up a graphic of it, showed pictures of all the best welterweights in the world, and they didn't put a photo of Terrence Crawford on the
wow.
graphic. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's personal.
That's ridiculous.
No, that is ridiculous. Dan Rayfield, appreciate it. Great work as always, man. Look forward to seeing your stuff from Vegas this weekend. Thanks a lot.
All right, Stephen, I appreciate it. Enjoy the fight, my man.
All right, buddy. The one and only Dan Rayfield, boxing writer extraordinaire for ESPN, does great work for us. Make no mistake about it. Looking forward to listening and watching him over the weekend and reading his stuff, of course. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. You listen live to Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. We'll get back to your calls on the NBA playoffs on this fight Saturday night as well. So stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. Tune in for an NL Central rivalry this Sunday as the Cubs host the Cardinals, presented by Indeed. Coverage of Sunday Night Baseball begins at 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app, and at 7 p.m. on ESPN. By the way, when you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes, do you? You want an efficient way to get to a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screening questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring.